Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of our series of game types. I'm joined today by David Hall, aka Halsey. Hey, Halsey.
Hello, hello.
So, we worked together at Riot Games for some time. If you didn't catch the first video on style, I recommend checking that one out. We kind of go on for a while talking about different styles and approaches to that and some advice for you on preparing your portfolio to get your first job. In this video, we are going to dive into gameplay types or genres as they're sometimes called. We're calling it gameplay just because sometimes the gameplay experience that you have in any given game might actually be a combination of genres, and we'll go more into what that means in a minute, but I just wanted to clarify that. So, when we're talking about a genre, Halsey, how would you define a genre? What is a game genre, as it
Mm,
were?
game genre. Yeah, the gameplay. So when I'm thinking of like the different types of games, and we've talked about this a little bit before, where you and I both are just playing a bunch of different types of games.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, they can just be the general mood of the game. Like, hey, sometimes I just want to play a shooter, or sometimes I want to play a strategy game or a city builder, or uh, I just want to role play and play a role playing game for a little bit. Um, they're like the vehicles that we entertain ourselves with. I suppose that's a clumsy way of saying that, but
Nice.
yeah.
Now, I mean, for people watching, if you play games, you're probably familiar with a lot of different genres. You've probably heard these things thrown around. I think sometimes we can also take this for granted. Being game developers ourselves, like we read game dev articles all the time. We're chatting about it at the studio all the time. Oh, yeah, this thing and that thing. And there's a lot of jargon that ends up getting thrown in the mix. And so you might be thinking, a genre, I already know what a genre is, skip the video. Well, I mean, maybe you do, and maybe you know that from an outside perspective. Our goal here is to talk about it from an inside perspective of, yes, these are the genres, generally speaking, on the outside. First off, what is the jargon in case you missed it and didn't know? And secondly, what does it mean to be an effects artist working on these different genres? I think that's the big goal that I wanted to cover in this video. So we'll just kind of dive into it and then talk a bit about what we know happens in development that's unique for each genre or each different type of gameplay. We're probably not going to be able to cover it all, not every type of gameplay, but we'll try to speak in broad categories at least to cover as much ground as we can. Okay, so certain games have unique things within their genre. And a great example of this would be like introducing a new mechanic, but that's what makes you stand out from other games. Or sometimes there's a genre within a genre, like in the case of Horizon Forbidden West, you have this thing called Machine Strike, which is a little strategy game built inside of an open world action RPG game. What does RPG stand for, Halsey, in case the fine folks at home don't know?
Oh man, real potatoes. No, that's not right. Role playing game. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
so different types of role playing games. What have we got? How can you role play? How can you play a role, as it were, in a game?
Uh, well, yeah, I think there's several different. I mean, if you're watching this video, you've no doubt played plenty of. You might even have a favorite. There are games where you are playing this character. That's who you are. You might be playing a game where you're making up the character. This is my little person, my little avatar, uh, and
Hmm.
uh, the focus of a game like that is really about the story that is being told, either a story that has been written and you are learning more about it, or a story that you're writing yourself as you're role playing into your character's overall story that you're creating up on the fly. Sometimes those are really fun games to play.
So it's all about immersion in the experience, in the role, as it were. And
Hmm.
the role of an effects artist on any role playing game, in my experience, is definitely going to be to enhance the fantasy of whatever the player is doing. So if the role that the player is having is like, I am a big, strong, powerful tank, then the visual effects are going to show big, like sweeping, powerful motions and impacts that a tank type character would have. And when we say tanks in games, we don't always mean like a tank with tank treads. We usually mean this is a character that has a lot of armor, a lot of defense, and they're typically slower moving, but they're harder to take down. They probably don't do as much damage, which is kind of backwards from a real life tank if you think about it, because a big tank does a lot of damage and has a lot of armor, but it's slow moving.
Yeah, don't think about it too much. Don't
Don't
think
think
about it
about it
too
too
much.
much. Okay.
You'll
Well,
hurt your brain.
RPGs. So we've got action RPGs, which are typically more free form. The effects for these are going to be happening very spur of the moment. It's going to be a lot of them happening all over the place. They're going to be usually combining with each other because your effects are going to be overlapping with your enemy's effects. You're going to be swiping at them while they're shooting at you, or you're going to be shooting at them while they're swiping at you. Uh, Action RPGs would be, oh gosh, there's so many action RPGs out there. Um, the Devil May Cry series comes to mind, Bayonetta. Um, I mean, there's the Darksiders Genesis game that came out. I think, technically speaking, the Diablo series are all action RPGs. Um, Wayfinder, which we've been talking about, is an action RPG. These bring in other elements as well, such as like open world. So, like the Zelda Breath of the Wild and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, as well as Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West, Burning Shores. These are also action RPGs and simultaneously open world adventure RPGs as well. Sometimes we just call them adventure games, but they technically are an RPG. So the genres become a little fuzzy. The boundaries between get a little blurred. Uh,
They're
what?
the stylized of the game genre.
Yeah, yeah. The key is with an action RPG, it's you're fighting. There's action, and it's happening typically in real time, as opposed to something like a JRPG or Japanese RPG, which is more turn based. So this has many variants to it as well. The classic Final Fantasy games are JRPGs. One might say that Pokemon is a JRPG as well because it's turn based. It's also got elements of like exploring an open world, but the combat itself is what would give it that definition.
And it's interesting from as a visual effects artist when you're coming into these projects, um, really taking a step back and asking these questions of, hey, what is this game about? Because where is the focus supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
So, like we're saying with like maybe a typical RPG, really what you're wanting to highlight and illustrate is the world around you and making it feel super immersive. And so there's a lot of like, and I think of like the Last of Us series where we were talking about not stylized, but how detailed, that's the word, how detailed everything is down to the dirt on the ground to
Mm-hmm.
really sell the idea that you're in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
Or another one that comes to mind is the Red Dead Redemption series, like Red
Mm-hmm.
Dead Redemption 2. Super volumetric. You feel like you're in these grand like vistas, um, and the focus for the visual effects differs between these gameplay types. You know,
Yeah.
as opposed to like the action RPG, it's not so much trying to sell like you being immersed in that environment. It's to sell you are in the moment right now getting slapped in the face by some giant sword, or
Mm-hmm.
you need to duck and roll and get out of the way, and you're seeing all these things happen and it's just bam 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 bam. uh, trying to stay like in the moment and read what's going on. And as
Yeah.
a visual effects artist, these are two very different problems to solve. You know.
Yep. It's true. And then you add the component of an MMO, which stands for massively multiplayer online. So you have an MMORPG, which is a mouthful of abbreviation. The biggest one right now is World of Warcraft. It's been the biggest for a long time. You've also got Final Fantasy 14, Guild Wars 2, and of course many others. Um, an MMORPG not only has you and the enemies you're fighting playing all these effects, but also other players. And so you've got massive amounts of players, as the genre title would define, massive amounts of players all fighting a boss together in a big raid. And the boss is playing its effects, and the enemies that the boss is summoning in are also playing their effects. And it's chaos. It's absolute visual effects soup. And I hope we get some good footage to showcase an example of this, either from Final Fantasy 14 or World of Warcraft. Would be prime examples of the kind of effects soup chaos that we're talking about. And so those teams of effects artists are thinking a lot about clarity and balance and level of importance and how to measure it out. This is also true of the MOBA genre. What does MOBA, MOBA stand for, Halsey?
Oh boy. I can do this. I can do this. Massive online
Oh, you already screwed up.
battleground. Oh, no. Wait. Multi operational
Nope,
battle arena.
nope, nope. Close.
More opinions, better answers.
Oh goodness. Okay, I'll cut in here and help. It's multiplayer online battle arena. You were
That's not what I
close,
said.
especially with that.
That's what
I
I said.
think maybe it was. We'll have to watch the recording back.
It wasn't. It wasn't. I'm just being a jerk.
So
You know.
we know a little indie game that is a multiplayer online battle arena. It's called League of Legends. It's this
I
little
remember
thing you
that
might have
one.
heard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, League was not the first MOBA, as it's called. That title would go to Defense of the Ancients, which was a mod, I believe, of Warcraft 3. Mod meaning it was a modification. Somebody made a fan game using the Warcraft 3 modifier tools to create a custom game. They have a whole modding community over there. And Defense of the Ancients used Warcraft 3 assets. Warcraft 3, by the way, was a real time strategy game, or RTS for short. And that's where you in real time command your troops to go and fight things and build buildings to make more troops. And that has its own considerations with effects, mainly that it's top down camera. The camera is always looking down onto the battlefield, and the effects are spawning from the characters. They're shooting at each other, they're blowing things up, but it's all, we call it a locked camera. So it's not going to come down at the level of the units, and you're not going to really play from that. Not in most RTS games, anyway. I guess in Command and Conquer, you could come down really close and see your units up close. That was kind of fun, but it's not really a
Yeah.
practical way to command a battlefield from far away. So anyway, the MOBA genre is related to the RTS, but it's focused on just a couple of characters. Namely, you only really control one character at a time, and you fight in teams. And in League of Legends, that also gets some effect soup going on because you have 5 players per team, all spamming abilities at each other in a big team fight. And we'll show some footage of that too. That was a fun journey trying to balance the effects for that. What do you think? Did we succeed?
I think we did succeed in making some soup. Yes. Yeah.
We succeeded in making soup. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like it's impossible not to get it somewhat soupy when you have so many things going on.
Yeah.
And like I think how we mentioned in the previous video, when it comes to style. League has a very particular style. The skin lines have their own particular style, and so yeah, you have to kind of like balance between what is like going to not result in soup,
Yeah.
but also keep players satisfied and
Hmm.
just be fun. Because if it's not getting soupy at all, it might be because it's boring. You know, that that might be going on. If you have that many effects firing off, you know, we're talking dozens of effects at any time, it's just gonna happen.
Yep.
So League is anything, but it's not boring. Uh,
No,
and
it
League
is.
effects.
I think people have used many adjectives to describe League of Legends over the years, and boring is not one of them. Um, okay, okay. So MOBAs are a ton of fun. It's actually a very popular genre right now. League of Legends is leading the way. As far as I know, it's still leading the way as the number one MOBA, and there's always more coming out. And they're mixing in other gameplay elements. There's some coming on the scene that are introducing like more rapid forms of attacking or ways to like move about the environment, like jumping and clearing gaps and things like that, which I think League of Legends does to an extent, but they're just trying to like innovate and create new types of gameplay, which of course creates new opportunities for effects. And like you're saying, the balancing act that that happens with clarity and satisfaction. How clear is it and how satisfying is it? That's difficult in any game. I think every game has to figure out for itself how much they care about clarity, how much they care about satisfaction, and where that line is going to fall. And effects obviously plays a huge role in that. Okay, well, we've only been through a couple of genres so far. Let's kind of blast through some more. We've got rhythm games, which is a whole different thing. The effects need to hit on a very specific rhythm for things like this. This would be like Guitar Hero or Rock Band, or I think in a way, Legend of the Necro Dancer is what it's called. Or they also did the Hyrule Legend, the Hyrule version
Oh,
with
really?
the
I never
Zelda
tried that.
characters. Yeah, where
Oh,
you're
very
like
cool.
moving on a rhythm. That's like an action RPG rhythm combo. Those games
Nice.
and pixel art. It's like it's all together. Um, there's other things like puzzle games. So many great puzzle games out there. Oftentimes, larger games will have a puzzle game inside of them. This is common um, to say, oh, let's take a break from the regular game. Let's do some puzzling. You've got platformer games, which is a very broad category. There's 2D platformers, which have a side scrolling element, like Ori and the Blind Forest. You've got the new Super Mario Bros. All the new Super Mario Bros. Games are side scroller 2D platformers. Sometimes they're rendered in 3D, but the camera is at a 2D angle. Whereas you've got like Mario 3D World, which is a 3D platformer, or uh, what's the latest one? Mario Odyssey, I think at the time of filming this, is the latest full
Yeah, I think so.
3D Mario
I haven't
game.
tried it, but I'm gonna say yes, even though I have no idea,
Well,
because then I'll.
there was Mario Bowser's Mario the Mario 3D World for the Switch came out with Bowser's Fury as well, which, in my humble opinion, is the best Mario 3D platformer of all time so far. Very
Wow.
satisfying experience. It's great because it's actually a shorter experience than some of the other uh, Mario titles, but that's a platformer. We're just talking about a lot of Mario games. Other people make platformers too.
Well, there's like let's see, there's the Assassin's Creed entire game line. They've made so many of those now. I think
Oh
those are
my gosh,
technically a platformer.
that's right, because the gameplay, it's not just I mean, it's an RPG platformer, maybe. It's like a
Yeah,
hybrid.
it's like a mix and match kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
because you're also scaling walls, jumping off of roofs, platforming around.
Star Wars just came out with their Jedi Survivor, and I think that would also be a mix matchy hybridy platformer, because you're doing a lot of the same things. You're role playing, but you're also
Yeah.
jumping off the sides of walls and doing the whole the sliding on the wall as you're running across things.
See, this is what I'm saying. The boundaries get so fuzzy because I'm thinking of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, very platformy, but also
Oh
very
yeah,
action
exactly.
RPG.
Yeah,
Really, what we're saying with a platform is you're jumping from one platform to the next.
yeah.
But
It is funny how it's evolved from from like the literal representation of, yeah, you are going from one platform to another, to that's just like the genre of it. That's just like the category that now applies to things where you aren't, there's no platforms, there's no, like, you just kind of, but you are going from one place to another, and that's part of the
I
gameplay.
would say specifically if you can jump, then it already has platforming elements. The moment you introduce a jump into a game, it becomes more like a platform, and there's some, like, I would say,
Like
height
in order
difference.
to, yeah, like in order to progress the game, you need to jump. Not just like you can jump, but in order to progress with where you're going in the game, you need
Yeah,
to jump over there on top of that thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Racing games. Oh my gosh. I learned how to drive from Gran Turismo. This shows how old I am. The first Gran Turismo,
Oh,
I
nice.
I was able to drive in that game before I got my driver's license. And I remember one time I was like spinning out on the ice in real life because it was wintertime and I was new to driving. And I pulled out of the spin because I knew how to do it from a racing simulator.
That's amazing. Wow.
um, I saved myself from crashing into someone's mailbox. I mean, not life and death situation, but still pretty cool. And yeah, I love racing games. Mario Kart is like a battle racer, right? It's the most iconic battle racer, really. It's been hard for others to topple. Racing games. What are some effects considerations for racing games? Do you think?
Oh man, for racing games, the thing that I think of first is like, you have to make split second decisions. You're not going to have a whole lot of time to read what is happening with the effects. So it needs to be really clear, really quickly. And then once maybe it's like a speed boost, or maybe it's a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like those have two different. Like, let's pick on Mario Kart for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to read, like, okay, the speed boost is over here. There's like some kind of flashy little bit that's getting my attention. I need to head over there, as opposed to like uh, you're about to get hit with the blue shell. You're in first place, and you're about to get hit with the blue shell.
Mm-hmm.
There's no escaping it if you're in first place.
There is
Well,
one way to deflect a
there is
blue
one
shell.
way. Yeah, there is one way, but for the most part, there's no escaping. I love how we're both just like, actually,
Now
you
people are
could,
going to be like,
but
"How do I do it? How do I?" It's the horn item in Mario
yeah,
Kart 8, at least. There's the I don't know what it's
but
called. It's the horn. It does the shockwave.
yeah,
It will
yeah.
kill a blue shell if you time it just right.
It has to be just, it's so, but that
Yeah.
moment is just like, it's longer in pacing than a lot of the other effects,
Hmm.
because you have, as the visual effects artist, you have a little bit more of a range to work with like everything else that's going on. Like, okay, we can really take our time and let this certain death sink in.
Well, I'm also
But
thinking of Need for Speed. The latest Need for Speed has some
oh yeah,
incredible effects. It's like hyper stylized. Um, we said hyper realistic in the last video, but they're uh, again, if you didn't see the style video, it was pretty good. You should check it out. Um, but the stylization is interesting for the effects and the smoke and energy coming off of the cars as you get these different boosts and bonuses. So I
I
think there's a
haven't
lot of
played it.
ways to. What's that?
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was saying I haven't played that one, but yeah, for that type of, because Need for Speed and Mario Kart, both racing games, but like we were saying, it's
Very
like
different.
very different into the spectrum. And so, yeah, I would suspect
Mm,
when you're in that more of like quote unquote realistic thing there. The effects that you're going to be really wanting to focus on are how can we boost this feeling of you are actually going fast and you're already
Mm-hmm.
going fast. Like, how do you make the player feel like they're going, like it's getting really, really intense? So I would suspect that's where a lot of like fancy shader work comes in, some distortions for this, that, not to get into like the specifics, but
Yeah. You know, and I'm thinking of Sonic the Hedgehog, the Sonic Frontiers game. You're
mm-hmm.
covering vast amounts of space very quickly in that game. And a lot of the feeling of that comes from the effects and the post processing as well in the
Mm-hmm.
screen, if I'm remembering correctly. But uh, yeah, cool. So racing, survival games. You know, oftentimes survival games for me, they don't have a ton of effects. But it's just that bit of ambience that adds to the experience of, like, I guess at the moment where you're fighting off whatever you're fighting off, whether it's dinosaurs or zombies or whatever in a survival game, um, there is like the hit impacts of like you want to make sure it's satisfying that like you're getting away. Sometimes there might be call outs depending on the survival game of like you need to pick this thing up, it's glowing, the visual effects are going to tell you to go
Mm-hmm.
pick that thing up because it's going to help you survive, or you know the building mechanics or the splashing in the water or whatever it is. Things
Yeah, it's
like
very
that.
similar to the RPG type thing we were talking about earlier, where the
Mm,
focus for, if there's if there's much VFX work at all, it really should be to sell the player that they're in this environment. You're in
yeah.
this survival situation. Um, yeah, and whether that's dinosaurs or zombies or um, there's a really fun game called The Long Dark. I don't know if you've ever played
Uh-uh.
it, but it's a like winter survival type game. There's no zombies or anything. There's wolves and like bears and stuff like that, but it's all very very grounded. But the art style is kind of like cut out, kind of blocky,
Interesting.
kind of shapes. Very, very, very interesting. And like the VFX work is super light, but again, the focus isn't to be like, hey, look at me, I'm a shiny thing. It's more toned down and it's more subtle than that. So yeah, as a visual effects artist, you have to know, not you have to know the audience, and the audience is like the game. It's that
Mm,
it's that phrase. Know your audience, know the game that you're working in, know like what the focus should be, so you're not detracting from that experience. If you're making League of Legends, you probably shouldn't be using the same techniques as you would on Super Smash Brothers, right? That's how you get extra soupy League of Legends.
mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm,
or if you're working on a racing game, you probably don't want to use like League of Legends techniques of of being super clear with this, because there's just not a whole lot of time. It needs to be a little bit flashier. It needs to be a little bit more like attention grabbing, so to speak.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, knowing what subject you're working in is crucial for VFX artists.
You know, you mentioned Smash Brothers, and fighting games have a lot of nuance within that genre as well. Because Smash Brothers is a platform brawler, right? Because it has platforming
Back
and
to
fighting.
platformers. They can jump, right?
Yeah, because they jump on platforms in Smash
Yeah.
Brothers. But then, you know, you've got like Street Fighter or the upcoming Project L that we mentioned in the other video, which are uh, fighters, but then they have a tag team element. So, like Project L has team elements. So, it's a team fighter where you tag each other out. Um, there's others that you don't have the tag out element. So, it's just a straightforward fighting game. Definitely, hitboxes are critical in fighting games. You need to see exactly where an ability goes and if it's going to contact the other player or not. And that's important to the people playing it. It's also critical that it's frame perfect. So each frame really matters in a fighting game. People that play these games professionally can tell the difference. They can catch the frame. They have like a superhuman ability to know when an ability is about to start and how to dodge that or how to counter it or whatever they need to do to respond. And so it's critical that the frame rate is consistent so that each frame of the ability happens in sequence properly, and that the hitboxes are consistent so the visual of the effect matches the visual of what will hit the enemy. Fighting games are very much a thing of precision when working it out, because your audience will hold you accountable for that. If you don't do it right, they will tell you, hey, this is wrong, this feels bad, this is terrible, whatever. There's a certain standard of expectation there. Um, we talked about adventure games. Some games are just pure adventure without the combat. You just go out and explore and have fun. Um, Maybe solve puzzles. There might be elements of a puzzle game mixed in with adventure games as well, such as like, I think Rhthym fits the bill on this one, where it's got like some interesting puzzles to solve, and it's great style, by the way, too. And you go on an adventure and explore and learn a story. Uh, Two other very jargony type terms would be bullet hell and roguelike. So, so do you want to take either one of those, Halsey? Which one of those most interests you?
I do, man. I'm gonna dig myself into a hole here, because I do like both of them. I feel like I like the roguelikes better, um, but
Why is it called roguelike?
see, this is the question I knew you were gonna ask,
There you go. I know why it's
and
called
I
it. If
have
you don't, it's
no
fine.
idea. I have no idea why it's called a roguelike.
I'm such a
Uh,
nerd about all things games. I'm so grateful that I have this. Okay, so basically, as I understand it, and anyone watching who knows the actual story, if I get it wrong, I apologize. But as I understand it, there was a game called Rogue that's like, it's a pretty old game, but it was made using like ASCII characters. So, like, your screen was just letters and symbols from like your character map that you could type. And they were, I think, different colors and things. But the idea was that you were a character that you had to go through. You were a rogue, and you had to go through and fight enemies. And if you died, you started all over again. That was the whole thing. So you would try to see how far you could go through all the different dungeons and all the different levels against all the different enemies and not die. And you get different items each time you play. It's kind of randomized, and when you die, it's over. You lose all the stuff you collected, you lose all the progress you made, and you start right back at the beginning with nothing. And it was pretty harsh. And you'd think that that doesn't sound fun, but apparently it was really popular. People loved it. People who I guess are a bit, masochistic or whatever.
well, many
Um,
of the roguelikes that I've played fit that description, and they're still fun. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So a roguelike is typically, well, it's typically, it has that element where you die, you start over. However, you keep something. And usually in a roguelike, you keep some kind of progress. So you're a little more powerful, or you have a little more options, or it's a little more fun the next time.
But aren't they
Whereas I
typically
Yeah,
like 2D as well? Like, aren't they like typically 2D,
no, they don't have to be. So Returnal is a roguelike that is next gen.
Oh,
It's like
okay.
a next gen shooter. It's the first one I think that I know of that is actually at the top of the line of like fidelity and technology on a next gen console, and a roguelike at the same time. It's kind of one of a kind for now. But yeah, so it can be anything. Often they are 2D because usually they're made by indie studios that just kind of want to do something simple and fun,
Hmm.
but then has a lot of replayability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for visual effects, like, it's interesting how, um like, the focus for that development is really about finding these moments to reward the player with. So you're taking a risk going into this dungeon, taking this turn. You don't know what's in this crate. you don't know what's going to happen. There's an enemy there. You're fighting this enemy. Those things need to be clear, but also like really rewarding and specific to those moments as you're going through this adventure, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to a bullet hell, which, as the name would suggest, is just a whole bunch of stuff on the screen just firing off, uh, which can be a lot of fun. But yeah,
A game I want to point out here would be Nex Machina, which
yeah,
is a really fun indie game. But oh my gosh, the effects and the bullet hellness of all of it is insane in that game.
yeah, yes, a little seizure inducing sometimes, but I say that with love. Like in if you love that genre and that style, then it's like okay, yeah, yeah.
I
Sometimes you
think
just want to blow things up,
I think
you know.
maybe not literally because the whole screen isn't flashing, or maybe it could be. I don't know. There's actually, that's worth mentioning about seizures in game development. There are ways for developers to test it to make sure that it's not going to cause problems, or at least if they know something might, they can put a warning in there.
Mm.
Um, we'll make sure if we show footage, we pull from footage and trailers that don't have that warning that we know, because yeah, that's one thing to think about is some genres can tend to be very overstimulating and very intense,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that's your jam and maybe it's not. Maybe you want something like a chill cozy game. There's a whole new wave of cozy mmos. We were mentioning mmos earlier, like Palia or Palia, depending on how you
Mm-hmm.
want to
Mm-hmm.
pronounce it, which just came out, which I've been playing a ton. It's a lot of fun. And other cozy type games like Animal Crossing, or Stardew Valley would be another good example of like a sort of
Oh yeah.
cozy, like very minimal conflict or combat. It's mostly focused on building relationships with the villagers, tending your garden, building your house, decorating your house. Effects for these are again probably going to be pretty minimal, but then can also showcase really high moments like really rare items or really interesting ways to express yourself. Like in Palia, I like to say Palia because it's like hanging out with pals.
Yeah, there you go.
That's why I like it. But then there's Paleo, like prehistoric, but it's not a prehistoric game, so I think it'd be Palia. Um, there's a firework item where you can put it on your hunting bow. So instead of shooting arrows, you shoot fireworks and they explode and it has a nice little effect to it. So that's like a very pricey item that is pretty rare to see. And so having a nice effect on there really matters.
there's
So,
there's
yeah.
something to be said though about like the the benefit of minimal effects, which might
Mm-hmm.
be blasphemy, giving
Mm-hmm.
like who we are and what we're doing, but uh, I think there's a lot of benefit to like with Stardew Valley. Like if you're working on your farm or you pick an apple or something, you don't need a big moment
Mm-hmm.
and for a visual effect. Sometimes having those little just boop, kind of a thing. It's not super complicated, but there are 1,001 ways to overcomplicate that, which would make it a worse
Yeah.
experience. And
There's
so,
there's two things in Palia that I really like, and we'll have to get footage of these. Is when you fish and you throw your line out in the water and it plops in the water, it's this very satisfying splash, like bloop, and it makes fishing even more satisfying because so you see that nice little splash. And then the waterfalls that they have, I think, are quite pretty. As you're walking around in the world, there's different waterfalls, and they have a really nice look to them. So, yeah, like ambience in the environment, that kind of stuff, super important to the experience.
exactly. Yeah. Just because they're not over the top mega super nuclear explosions doesn't mean that they didn't get the same amount of love and appreciation for that artist.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I think those can be the unsung heroes sometimes. It's really enjoyable to find those type
When
of
I was
moments.
working on Animal Jam, which is a kids game that's like kind of a cozy MMO, actually, if you think about it. It's like a kids sandbox MMO with mini games and all this other stuff. you would collect items to put in your home or den. That's because you're an animal, so they would be the den items. And I always pushed for, ooh, we should do a koi pond with cool ripples on it, or oh, we should do like this cool like lava lamp with like goo floating around in it, or oh, we should do. And I always found a way to put in things that had effects to them because
Yeah.
I'm like, the effects make it cooler because it's animating and it has this interesting thing to it. So, oh man, Animal Jam's a great game. That was a lot of fun to work on back in the day. But yeah, effects definitely plays a role there too. And for people who want to work on something more chill but also have a good impact with satisfaction, I think that's a great genre to go for, is the more cozy type genres. But yeah, we should
Definitely.
probably, I mean, we've been talking long enough. We should probably call it. All right. I think we covered many game types, if not most. Hopefully that gives you all a better idea of what interests you and what you might want to contribute on. In the next video, we are going to talk about game engines. I'm super excited about that. We're going to talk about the differences there and what to look for and think about when you're considering different game engines and what game engines even are. You might be asking yourself that right now. What is he talking about, a game engine? So we're going to dive into that. And thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.